Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Let the filibustering begin.
Welcome to Nerd Party.
Hello and welcome to Filibuster here on the Nerd Party Network. Joining me as ever is Dallas King as we return to the movies with Fast and the Furious 9, the Fast Saga. Regardless of what people think of the movie and the franchise, it's a big step in the right directions of cinemas returning to normal. So Dallas, the movies, how did it feel to watch Fast and the Furious 9 last week?
It felt like family, didn't it? It felt like I mean, we'll get onto what we thought of the film, but I think this was my first ever actual non-festival press screening. Some people probably would have thought me mad to get a 5:30 train down to Glasgow to be there for about 3 hours to watch a movie and then come back up the road straight afterwards, given that the movie was out 2 days later. But hey, the movies, nature is healing. Basically anything that something happens with a movie that feels like it was, pre-2020, everyone keeps just going, nature is healing. I heard that the Belmont are going to be in the film house, are doing an in-person Q&A soon for a film. I was like, what a concept. So yeah, no, it felt good to be there and experience a film which features Edinburgh while watching it in Glasgow. I was wondering if there was going to be a little bit of intercity rivalry between the critics.
Yeah, so I mean, you kind of highlighted the word family there. Family very much is the plot of this movie, as Dom is living off the quiet life off the grid with Letty and his son, but they know that danger always lurks just around the peaceful horizon. This time, that threat forces Dom to confront the sins of his past to save those that he loves the most, his family. His crew soon arrives, coming together to stop a world-shattering plot by the most skilled assassin and high-performance driver they've encountered. Dom's forsaken brother, oh my god. So, I think it's probably important to establish our Fast and the Furious credentials here. We probably have people that listen to this that have seen all the movies, have probably got their own podcast series on Fast and the Furious. But what kind of Fast and the Furious fan are you, Dallas?
I mean, I'm not going to, say that I am the biggest fan of the franchise in the world. If people want that podcast, I think they should check out Cameron and Oasis 35-minute movies podcast, where they've been going through the entire saga. They are huge Vin Diesel fans, so definitely give that a listen. But I mean, I think I'd seen the first film and then hadn't really seen any of the others until The Rock joined the franchise for Fast 5, and then I thought it was just dumb action. The Rock, I'm a huge fan of The Rock, so yeah, it was great to see him in this sort of sparring against Vin Diesel. I think the franchise finally had an antagonist who could physically step up to Vin Diesel, and from that point on it just sort of got even bigger, more ridiculous. The films, I think, to their detriment slightly, got longer as well. I mean, I've gone back to watch the other films since, and it is a bit bizarre to think that 9 films in, well, technically I guess 10 given Hobbs and Shaw as well, that this was a film franchise that started off as basically a Point Break remake but with cars instead of surfboards, and they went from sort of boosting cars and DVD players to becoming super spies and secret agents. I mean, it's just utterly ridiculous, but I think you just have to lean into the fact. I think it was Fast 5 starts off with Brian and Dom driving off a cliff, jumping out of the car, landing into the water, probably a good 50 feet below them, and surviving. And I think that was a point where I went, okay, right, this is, I'm just going to have to accept that, the laws of physics are, just not adhered to in this franchise, even though in the new film, Tej, played by Ludacris, specifically talks about the laws of physics. And it's like, really, have you not been watching even just the 2 hours up until the point where you get launched into space? I mean, no, physics do not apply in these movies. But I think if you switch your brain off, there's a lot of fun to be had. But I'm potentially nearing the end of my tether with certain aspects of the franchise. What about yourself?
Yeah, I'm very much the same as you, to be honest. I bought the first one on DVD from Tesco during sort of the height of the DVD boom. Yeah, like that used to be the place to go. I lived in the countryside, so Aberdeen was always that little bit
You
of a
couldn't get
stretch
into
too
Virgin
far.
Megastore.
You couldn't always be guaranteed a trip to HMV or Virgin Megastore, maybe once a month, whereas like you were always pretty much guaranteed to be going to Tesco maybe like once a week for the big shop, or maybe you'd be kind of going along sort of like after swimming or in kind of town to visit like a family. So there was always that possibility. So like a lot of my DVD shopping was done in the Tesco chart, and I remember picking up Fast and the Furious in the heyday where like you would watch the DVD and you would dive into all the extras. Like it was really kind of a good time. But then I think I only ever saw like a couple of bits of the second one. I think my brother owned that one. I didn't. And I never watched the third or the fourth one. I just had no interest in it. I had no real attachment to the first one apart from it was something to buy and watch with my pocket money or like my paper round money that week. And then I remember going to see the fifth one. A friend, I used to have a Friday off from work, and it was always ideal. We just go to the cinema and just watch a couple of movies. And my mate went, well, let's go watch Fast and Furious 5. And I remember just being like, it shows how far the franchise has come, but I remember rolling my eyes at how easily a car was able to tip over a bus, and I was like, oh, come on. But by the end of Fast and Furious 5, I had just the best time with it. I thought The Rock was a great addition. It was just really fun. I just can remember that like safe being dragged around Mexico, and it was good. And then I watched the sixth one, had no real strong memories of that. I think that one's in London. The seventh one was really fantastic considering everything that had gone on with Paul Walker. And I remembered a real sense of sort of anxiety watching that film, wondering what was going to happen to this character and how they were going to handle it. But they did so incredibly well. And the eighth, what's the submarine one?
That's the submarine one where The Rock changes the trajectory of a missile with his bare hands. Yeah, I think 6 was the London one with Rita Ora that was in it for a second.
Yeah, so it's one of those ones like I will go see them now, but I've only ever watched some of them. I've only ever watched them once, or some of them not at all really. But it's one of those things like I went to see it in opening day in IMAX. Like I wasn't too hyped up for it, but I was kind of looking forward to it a little bit. Justin Lin had obviously taken a bit of a detour and done Star Trek Beyond. I remembered a lot of people were a bit critical about his being chosen at the time. Like, what's this Fast and the Furious director doing a Star Trek film? Whereas I was quite excited because I was like, well, I've seen from his Fast and the Furious movies, I've obviously not seen the third and the fourth ones, which he did, but he's really good at ensemble casting, giving everyone a moment in the sun. I'm excited. But that felt like that was something that kind of got a bit missing in this ninth one, where they have a huge cast, but it all kind of just seems to get kind of bogged down into kind of like madder kind of set pieces, and it just becomes a little bit too silly, a bit too physics defying to be enjoyable. I think almost a similar complaint I had almost with Spiral, where it's like you don't always have to go big and crazy with your traps. Why don't you go a bit DIY, a bit small scale? And there's something exciting about that. You think of something like last year or the year before, Ford versus Ferrari, that became genuinely gripping. There was nothing really gripping about Fast and the Furious 9, any of the car pieces for me.
Yeah, no, I think my biggest problem with the franchise is something which is actually almost directly, called out at one point just after the first action sequence where Tyrese Gibson's Roman survives the first sequence where he's shot at by 14 people, survives, avoids a landmine, survives, the truck flips over and apparently lands on him but doesn't, survives. And, he keeps saying, don't you think it's a bit odd that, we're going through all these crazy adventures and surviving without a scratch? And I'm like, yes, it is, because there's a real lack of stakes in these films where that no one's really going to die, and if they do die, like Han in Tokyo Drift and at the end of Fast and Furious 7, I think it was, they come back because apparently they didn't really die, and it's almost like the Marvel Cinematic Universe where it's like, Loki dying again and again and again, but he keeps coming back and stuff like that. No one ever really dies, and it's just like, it's like I don't feel emotionally invested in the adventures because I know that everyone's going to survive without a scratch. The only things that are not going to survive are cars, and about the 20 of Vin Diesel's Dodge 70s Chargers. I don't know how many versions of this car he has, but he seems to have an infinite amount. And this film in particular, you've got this huge ensemble cast and whatever, but the film at 2.5 hours gets bogged down into basically retrofitting or retconning the franchise, which has already gone into the fact that Vin Diesel, who has always, to the point of parody, has kept going on about family this whole time, but actually has had a brother, which he has not mentioned at any point in any of the previous movies because they were estranged due to something that happened to their dad. And of course, then you've got the slightly people's eyebrow raising thing that his brother is John Cena, because you can see the familial connection there. I like John Cena. I think he's got surprisingly good comic chops, and he's clearly a physical foe for him. But he gets the scene in Edinburgh, which we can go into more to discuss. But it's just there's never any real danger, I think, and as shown with like Jason Statham and stuff like that, and a bit here as well. The villains hang around to the point where suddenly they become accepted into the wider Fast and Furious family. And I think it has to be said that, I was kind of missing Statham and The Rock in this one. They've gone off to do their own sub-genre within this saga in the Hobbs and Shaw movies due to apparently Vin Diesel critiquing The Rock's acting, which I think is a big joke in itself. But I think that's kind of what my biggest issue with the films is. It never feels like any of them are in danger, and this whole sort of set piece at the end where it sort of goes Moonraker and sends them into space, it feels like it was the kind of thing that started as a joke, like snakes on a plane, but then kind of we need to get it done before Tom Cruise does it for real. Because I think if he does do a scene in a Mission Impossible franchise where Ethan Hunt goes into space, he will be filming it in space and not using CGI, because that's the kind of guy Tom Cruise is.
Yeah, it's one of those things. I like John Cena too, but he felt very miscast in this film. I couldn't take to him. It wasn't that I didn't believe that he was his brother or anything like that. It was just like you were watching it going, I just don't think this isn't his acting strength.
He's not villainous enough, is he, really?
No, and he just sort of seemed to be a bit mugging, it just wasn't that great. And I just had the same thing. I was like, I really wanted The Rock and Jason Statham in that, because that's who I associate with the Fast and the Furious kind of franchise, having only sort of seen the first one and not watched that in 20 odd years, or however many years it is now. I associate with The Rock's in there, and then Jason Statham came along, and they are highly charismatic, interesting people. They really bounce off these kind of characters. A lot of the characters, they don't bring too much. Like they speak in kind of cliches, they're ciphers, but with those two there's some genuine charisma, there's a bit of tension, there's a bit of kind of spark. Like that felt really missing in this cast. I wasn't really interested in much of the characters apart from that space double act. I thought they worked quite well together, but
what, not even Hollyoaks Natalie Emmanuel?
I have not seen Hollyoaks in probably longer than I've seen Fast and the Furious. But yeah, you mentioned Edinburgh. Like, what did you make of? I think we can safely park that the geography is absolutely mental and insane. But what did you make of the Edinburgh sequence? It was certainly much hyped, and within the film as well, it's constantly mentioning that we're going to go to Edinburgh. There's something in Edinburgh. How did it feel to finally get to Edinburgh?
I mean, it is always nice when Edinburgh or a Scottish city appears as the city it's meant to. Tough luck, Glasgow, because your appearance in the Fast and Furious franchise was in Hobbs and Shaw, but you were basically, I think you were doubling for London at the time, so it was nice to see Edinburgh. But I think, you try to put you switch your brain off and just accept it, but I think anyone who's ever watching a film where a city that you've been in and know very well, it's going to niggle you when the geography doesn't work out. So when you're suddenly leaving St James's Cathedral on the Royal Mile, and then Vin Diesel's driving down Victoria Street in the opposite way, and then suddenly you're over on George Street in the Old Town, New Town, and stuff like that. It doesn't really work. I think the only thing that kind of made slight sense was maybe the trajectory of John Cena's infinitely long zip wires going down from the cathedral towards Waverley Place. I mean, I saw a bit of the filming. I did see Vin Diesel's stunt double jump out of a window onto the bus. I didn't realise that building was a kilt shop, apparently, according to the Fast and Furious universe. But yeah, no, then driving suddenly from there all the way up into the, what's it you call it? The pubic triangle near the film house. Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever, but it was nice to see. I mean, don't even get me started on the physics of the electromagnets being used that can drag a car through a building a entire street away, but somehow are not strong enough to cause the car which they're within to physically implode. I mean, they only seem to work on the stuff that you want to get dragged along, not on anything else. I mean, people's fillings weren't being ripped out of their mouths or anything like that. You know, it's like COVID rules for ministers in the cabinet and the Joe Public. There's one rule for them and one rule for everyone else. But it was nice to see it, even though Infinity War surprisingly still contains the most geographically accurate action sequence in a movie, even more so than T2. Trainspotting 2, not Judgment Day.
I think what they need to do is, like, we've had like the much hyped opening of a new shopping mall in Edinburgh last week. Like, what they really need to do is get the zip wire, and that like looked ridiculously cool. And yeah, I was lucky enough to see like quite a lot of a lot of the like prep being done or things like that. Like,
you
I would
saw
go
Vin
to
Diesel's car, didn't you?
I did, yeah. I went onto the Royal Mile and for a meeting at the Waverley Chambers, and like there's his car, and then like I would go to a meeting at St Andrew's House and be like, oh, there's that Lothian truck, like, you know, all these things kind of stick out. Or I remember going to London and then coming back and getting off at Waverley and then going up the bit where they hijack the cars, and it was like they were getting all the prep done there as like people were just like going around their daily life. It was so surreal to see that, and I'm quite keen to just watch that again and just see how it all stitched together. It was quite impressive, to be honest, just seeing Edinburgh in a Fast and the Furious movie, just surreal, you know. And yeah, makes absolutely no sense. But I must admit, the one thing I did enjoy quite a lot, I know you were a bit critical, but there was, I loved the magnets. I thought they got really good value out of that magnets. Like, I thought like they'll have one set piece with it. They had quite a few, and I never seemed to get bored of the magnets.
You know, like a magnet plane where John Cena drives off a cliff, and then a plane swoops in and then picks him up using a magnet, like a claw game in an amusement arcade. But yeah, I mean, it was great to see the filming and stuff like that. Always a thrill to see a big action thing being filmed somewhere. I did have a look for John Cena, but of course you can't see him, so never mind. Hey.
Obviously, we did mention they do go into space. I found that quite funny, to be honest. It did involve a huge, putting my self-belief, everything to one side, but I quite enjoyed it, and it made me kind of giggle a little bit in my seat just seeing this little car drive around in space. And I thought that, you know, the punchline about the Minions was highly funny.
Like a Universal franchise. I did happen to note that they did stick to their own franchises for that joke.
So, but for you, was space just one step too far?
It was a giant leap for my brain to take, but I did accept it. I mean, I went with it. It was just that whole building up again to this emotional moment where they're going to have to put, you know, the magnets aren't working, so they're going to have to drive through the satellite, and they're potentially going to, you know, sacrifice themselves for that. And it's like, I mean, come on, we know that that's not really going to go. It had the same emotional heft as when Tony Stark in the first Avengers movie took the missile through the portal up into outer space. I knew that he wasn't going to die because it was announced a week before Avengers came out that he'd signed on for Iron Man 3. So, I mean, it's like, we know that they're going to... I mean, come on. Don't try and pull the wool over my eyes. But, I mean, it's difficult to know now where the franchise is going to go, because I think they've said 2 more movies. So I don't know where else it can go. I mean, I guess underwater, maybe Atlantis or somewhere like that. They could get submarines, car submarines like the one in, was it The Spy Who Loved Me? Something like that. They could start doing that. But I mean, mid-credit scene seems to hint that, you know, Hobbs and Shaw is not going to be completely separate from the franchise. They are going to get dragged back in at some point. So if it's setting up for Rock versus Cena 3, following 2 WrestleMania fights on the big screen for the final one, yeah, I'm still going to watch them. I'm still going to enjoy them, but I don't think I'm as invested as them unless The Rock is there.
Yeah, they've just said that, like, I think it was about 40 minutes ago, actually, they announced that they were going to begin shooting number 10, part 1 and 2.
After a $70 million opening weekend and during a pandemic, yeah, I think it's decent enough numbers to suggest that there's a bit of life left in the franchise.
So it's safe to say we're not the biggest fans of Fast and the Furious 9, but I think for me, I've said it with a couple films, its success can only mean good things for things continuing to open up and the return to cinemas and festivals and everything. Like, all this stuff just breeds confidence, and it's pleasing. And then, you'll have something like Black Widow next. So, we're on a bit of a roll now, and, we didn't really get that much of an impression last year. We had Tenet, and then everyone else was a bit too scared to follow, whereas now it just seems to be, it's just week after week, oh, that big film's coming out now, and it's things that you're booking with friends or going along to see. It's not necessarily always these indie movies that you're quite content to see on your own. It's event films, and that's something exciting.
Absolutely, yeah. I think the backlog is starting to fill out now, and I think we are in a situation where there are just too many movies sitting on the shelves, and they need to come out. The government said, it's onwards and upwards. They're not going to go back the way. We're not going to go back into another lockdown, which probably means that we are. But I think at the moment it's like, certainly here in the UK. I mean, the signs. I mean, a £6 million opening weekend for Fast and the Furious over 4 days is pretty impressive, given the social distancing measures, which are still in the cinema. I know in America it's slightly less, I think they're about 50% capacity. Over here we're probably still around about the sort of 25-30% capacity. So that's really sort of strong numbers. People do want to get out of the house, they want to go to the cinema, and if there's films there that they can't see anywhere else, they're going to watch them. But it's still interesting to see what happens with Black Widow in a week. Oh, it's less than a week now, because that is still doing the whole Disney Plus premium access window sort of thing. But £30 at home versus an unlimited card, I know where I'm going to be seeing it.
Yeah, I'll be the same. So what would be the 5 movies? I can't believe it that we've actually hit the halfway point of the year so far. It just seems like not too long ago we were trying to celebrate Christmas, and here we are at the halfway point. But what have been the 5 movies that have stood out for you this year, that if people didn't like Fast and the Furious, that they could maybe check out, or maybe come onto streaming now? What have been your highlights?
I mean, I suggested this to do on the podcast because it was this week sort of dropping on the last day of June, so we have reached the halfway point, incredibly. But I mean, cinemas only reopened on the 17th of May, so I haven't got that many films to choose from actual seeing in a cinema, I realised. So it was like, oh, right, okay. But no, there have been some good films released in the year. I actually had to go back to our podcast from the end of last year to kind of see what I'd mentioned in that, because we did what you saw in the cinema and what you saw at home. And I was like, okay, what? I didn't want to sort of mention films which I already mentioned, because last year, obviously, given what it was, we had to relax our rules. I'm normally the stickler for the rule where it has to be films which have been released in UK cinemas, but obviously we've relaxed the rules a bit to films that we have watched, because otherwise we'd have pretty much nothing to do and nothing to mention on the list. So number 6, an honourable mention, I just want to mention Willy's Wonderland, starring Nicolas Cage, only for the fact that I called it an absolute riot from start to finish, and that quote made it onto the back of the DVD. So there we go. Number 5 for me is a film which I saw on Netflix, a film which I think was meant to come out towards the end of last year, and I think it was called Unplugged. But then Netflix took it on, and this is an animated comedy called The Mitchells versus the Machines. Completely unexpected in that it was just really, really good. I had no expectations going in, started seeing some buzz a couple of days before it came out on Netflix, and then I watched it and I had a blast. I thought it was really, really funny, really strong, really written, and it's got probably the best appearance of a Furby since Uncut Gems. At number 4, it is Palm Springs, the time travel comedy drama starring Andy Samberg and Christine Milioti. Number 3, it's a film which I did see in the cinema, finally, and that was Sound of Metal. Number 2, another film which I did not know much about until seeing, but it completely blew me away at seeing it home, and that was Shiva Baby, which is now available to stream on Mubi. And number 1 will be no surprise to anyone who's heard me mention. Oh, basically, it's been on my Twitter feed since Sundance, and that is Prandtl Bailey Bond's Censor, which will I'm going to include it because it will be finally getting a cinematic release here in the UK. On the 20th of August. And if you're lucky enough to be in London during the end of July, you can catch it at Sundance London as well. So what have you...
I certainly will. I'm very excited for that one.
Yes, I know you'll be. Will it live up to the hype of me continually banging on about it week after week? I guess we'll have to see. But what have you? What highlights have you had from the first half of the year?
Yeah, so a lot had to be discounted from seeing as screeners and festivals last year. So Goodbye to Minari, Sound of Metal, it goes on and on. First Cow, all gone. So I've gone with at 5, Sir Alex Ferguson, Never Give In. I was stunned by this film, really, really impressed. I had kind of, I don't know what I expected kind of going in. I thought it'd be a generic football kind of documentary, but what we kind of got was an interesting kind of juxtaposition between sort of his life now as someone that's recovering from a brain injury and sort of his, career and how he grew up. And I was really pleased with the focus it had on his career in Scotland and,
Aberdeen.
some of the footage of like Aberdeen at, the height of the club's success, what was going on in Glasgow at the time. It was really striking and really insightful, and I loved it. And a lot of the aspects about how he could motivate players was fascinating, talking about tapping into their working class kind of credentials as these kind of kids, and how you kind of make those kind of things work. I thought that was stunning. At 4 is After Love. Got to catch this one last week at the cinema. A really beautiful story about a British converted Muslim who finds out that her husband, who's just recently died, has another wife and kid on the other side of the other side of the Calais. So so she goes over to France and hijinks ensue that, and it's hard to describe. I'm not going to spoil what happens about what happens when she gets to France, as it defies belief to an extent, but it makes for really gripping drama, so I'm good with that one. Mainstream, Andrew Garfield. It is not the most subtle film in the world. I know you saw this one last year. It's really stuck with me. I'm loving Andrew Garfield's post-Spider-Man career. I will watch anything he does. Yeah, social media is bad and influencers are ridiculous, but you know what? This film was hysterical and mad, and I just loved Andrew Garfield's performance in it.
Oh, I'm glad. I was interested I knew you'd watched it, but I never found out what you thought of it. I'm very glad that you enjoyed it. So certainly after Venice, I felt like I was alone in the pro-mainstream camp, so I'm glad that someone else has joined me on this hill.
Hell yeah. This one at number 2, I was stunned, was this year. I was Promising Young Woman. I think I saw that like a couple of days into January. It's all been said already. I mean, what a fantastic film. And for number 1, I'm the same as well. Shiva Baby. I just can't stop thinking about how great that film is, and I'm really looking forward to watching it again. And the Instagram account of the lead actress is the funniest thing kicking around at the moment. Her social media is just the bomb. So yeah, it's been a good start to the year, but I'm looking forward to what's to come as we start to get into festivals and then things like the new James Bond movie, etc. I think it's going to start to become a pretty diverse and exciting year.
Absolutely, and Promising Young Woman is one which I was slithering about including that one, but I had seen it last year, so I had to discount it. But I think certainly given my list, I think anything other than Censor and Shiva Baby I think there's a lot of spots to play for in my top 10 going forward into the year. I think there's a lot of good films to come out June, perhaps. Maybe even, the Bond film, if it even exists these days. I'm not sure if it is a real film, actually. I saw the trailer in front of Fast 9 the other day, and I was like, oh yeah, that's still coming out. It's like, I bet even Daniel Craig's probably thinks he's already done the marketing campaign, but when he finds out he still has to do that, I bet he's going to be like, oh.
He'll have been retired from Bond about 3 years since, like, by the time filming finished. It's ridiculous. But
I hope you have to do. Don't have to do any pickups or reshoots.
Oh God, yeah. Well, thanks everyone for listening, and we'll all join you in the second half of the year for more film chat. Thanks for listening. Bye.
Join the revolution. Join the Nerd Party.
Welcome to Nerd Party.